The Rational Male, Preventive Medicine, Chapter 5. The Redevelopment, Reassurance and Security Phase. Back when he had a telestial show, radio personality Tom Lexi had everyday women call in and tell their stories on how they used to be sexually and how they are now. He came up with their after driving past a grade school on his way to the studio and seeing all the women there waiting for their kids to come out, and wondered about what their lives used to be like in their children's 20s. This was a widely popular topic, and the confession just poured in as if all these women had been waiting for years to come cleanly anonymously, but the sexual past that their husbands would never dream they were capable of. Each of these women sounded proud of themselves, almost nostalgic, as if those experiences were some kind of past accomplishments. This is why I laugh at the concept of the quality women most men believe are jewels in the rough only they had the good fortune to find. Don't misinterpret that as women is equals to shit binary opinion. I mean, it is the sense that most guys' concept of quality woman is in a realistic idealization. There is not a guy in the world who committed to monogamy with a woman who didn't think she was quality when he decided to commit to her. Even if she was a clinical neurotic before he hooked up with her, she still had other determining qualities that made her worth of the effort. It is only afterwards, when the world he built up around his idealization of her comes crashing down in flames, that she really wasn't quality woman after all. The schism. An interesting internal schism occurs for women during the later half of their first security phase and through the development phase. The first aspect of the psychological schism is a drive for the unalterable sense of security. As she matures, the prerogative of an enduring security intensifies with each child she bears and each life in descent where that degree of security is tested. For the married woman who consolidated upon her best available provider male, this intensification usually manifests itself as a careless series of shit testing, not only over his capacity to consistently deliver an ever-increasing need for that provisioning, but also the alpha sustainability she convinced herself that the better she married would mature into later. The primary conflict of her during these phases is that her provider male SMV potential never quite looks like or compares with the idealized memories of the alpha men she entertained in her party years. I have written several essays regarding the dynamics of the alpha window, but at no other phase of a woman's life is she more prone to mourning a prior alpha lover than when she enters in the developmental phase. This is when the security a woman was so incensed in her epiphany phase becomes a liability, but still a necessity of her life. This assured security affords a woman a renewed focus on her alpha fuck side of the hypergamy, an alpha reinterest in physicality, in the hope that her maturity would make her a better judge and of the type of man who might better fulfill the alpha role that her current lover provided. From a social convention perspective, this is the cougar fantasy phase. Unless a man has reinvented himself and capitalized on his SMV potential to significantly to separate himself from the prior impression of better providership acceptability a woman initially expected of him, 5 minutes of alpha experience in her 20s will always prompt 5 to 10 years of better dedication to his part. If woman can realize the alpha facts aspect of hypergamy during her party years, and then realize the beta bugs aspects of hypergamy after the epiphany phase, then the internal schism a woman experiences in her development phase become a difference between her recoiling those two aspects within the man she is currently paired with. The second aspect of this schism is a marked reinterest in the alpha attributes of either the man she is currently paired with or the alpha attributes of the men outside that pairing. This side of the schism is particularly frustrating for both alpha and beta men paired with the woman experiencing it. The more an alpha a man actualizes his SMV potential through maintained or improved looks, career, maturity, affluence, status, etc., the more a woman's need for enduring security becomes threatened as her SMV consistently decays in comparison to his. A woman's logical response to this new form of competition anxiety usually manifests in two ways. The first being an intense motivation to domineer and control her relationship by placing herself in a dominant role. She assumes or attempts to assume headship of the marriage or relationship by way of new convenient conviction or from a self-created sense of her husband's, by association, all men's inherent untrustworthiness bolstered by social convention that insist women need to be head of the house. That is, she is the real boss. Her insecurity about her own incomparative SMV manifests in her demanding he do the right thing and limit his SMV potential for the sake of the more important roles as her and their family dutiful provider. The message becomes one of the "don't think you are too highly of yourself, mister. You've got a lot of responsibility to live up to." Of course, the problem with this is that man acquiescing to such dominance not only loses out of his capacity to maximize his SMV peak potential, but also confirms for his wife that his status isn't alpha as she confident is. This alpha disenfranchisement will play a significant part in a woman's development phase. The second logical response is apathy and resentment. A discontent from her SMV peaking mate may seem like a woman resigning herself to her non-comparative SMV fate, but it serves the same purpose as a woman's intent for rational dominance, an assurance of continued security and provisioning as a result of his willful limiting his SMV potential. His apathy is, by design, paired with the guilt that her mate is more focused on his own self-development than the importance he should be applying to her and the family. The result becomes one of the man chasing his own tail in order to satisfy his passive insecurity and failing passive shit test. In either instant, the seeds of a man's success or decline are planted in his ability to identify his schism in relation to how it aligns with his SMV potential. At the same time, it affects his long-term partner. The problem with the schism is that all of the limitation a woman would embrace against a man actualizing his SMV potential, the same limitation will also constitute a significant part of her justification for being dissatisfied with him during the redevelopment phase. Redevelopment or reassurance. The redevelopment phase can either be a time of relationship. The redevelopment phase can either be a time of rational turmoil or one of a woman reconciling her hypergamous balance with the man she is paired with. The security side of this hypergamous balance has been established for her long-term satisfaction, and a new alpha reinterest begins to grade in the ubiquitous, almost too dependable certainty for that security. Bear in mind that sources of this certainty need not to come from a provider male. There are a lot of eventualities to account for it. It may come from a never married woman's capacity to provide for herself, the financial support levied from the past husbands or fathers of her children, government subsidies, family money, or a combination thereof. In any event, while security may still be an important concern, the same security becomes stifling for her as she retrospectively contemplates the excitement she used to enjoy with her former, now perceptually alpha lovers, or perhaps the man her husband used to be. My fellow esteemed blogger, Darrock, has long covered the topic of women entering the eat, pray, love after the movie phase very well, coining the phrase, "she was unhappy." This is a justification call for women entering the development phase. Divorce fantasies, media abounds for women in this phase. Depending on when she consolidated on long-term monogamy, her kids are at or almost at the age of real independence. It may even be at the 20-year age, empty nest stage I described in part 3. But there is a fundamental reassessment of the man she is paired with and how his own realized SMV potential has either proved to have been a good bet or disastrous misstep, and as with the various prior phases of maturity, she finds there are convenient social conventions already pre-established for her to help justify the decision she'll make as a result of this reassessment. The binding, cooperative rearrangements of childbearing that necessitated her drive for security gradually decreases in importance, giving way to new urgency. Pairing with someone she really connects with before her, adjusted for age, SMV looks are entirely spent on the provider male she now loathes the idea of spending a future with. Pairing with someone she really connects with before her, adjusted for age, SMV looks are entirely spent on the provider male she now loathes the idea of spending a future with. The beta has served his usefulness, and now she realizes what she really needed all along was a man who had a true respect for under the conditions that her maturity has at least made her aware of. This is the turning point at which most beta men, still hopefully reliant on the false notions of equality in their relationship, find themselves on the sharp end of the feminine hypergamy we have cognitively dissociated themselves from a lifetime. They have cognitively dissociated themselves from a lifetime. It's not all doom and gloom, however. Depending upon a woman's degree of self-awareness and realism about her late-stage SMV, the decision may simply be one of the pragmatism. She understands she is with a man who can now best embody the hypergamatic balance of her in the long term, or she genuinely has a long-term feminine defined role and affinity of the man she paired with, who finally just gets it. Other consideration factor is as well, it is entirely possible this SMV peak will endure longer than her reassessment of him will take to determine religious convictions, may play a belt convenient part in his reassessment, or she may realistically reassess her own SMV as decayed to a point where staying with her provider male is her only tenable option. There is an interesting trend in divorcing schedules in the baby boomers that strongly correlate with the redevelopment phase reassessment I have described here. It is called grey divorce. Americans over 50 are twice as likely to get divorced as people at the age were 20 years ago. Jim Campbell, 55, a Boulder Colorado, says he and his wife grew apart after 34 years together. This number one best thing is common that my ex-wife and I was raising kids, Campbell says. When their two sons grew up, he says, we just didn't have enough activities, passion, interests that were in common, and when the boys were gone, that just became more and more, to me, obvious. Grey divorce, as is, there won't be a feminist media, the focus is on the men who divorce their wives, but statistically, the focus is on men who divorce their wives, but statistically, it is women who initiate over 70% all divorces. That is an important statistic to bear in mind when considering the psychological impetus of women in the development phase. In the interest of fairness, a woman can also find herself forced into this development phase as a result of a man who would come to realize his SMV peak and became actively aware of how a woman hypergamy had influenced his decisions for him. There are a minority of men who take the red pill or otherwise who exist in a marriage they have been settled for as her plan B, or they may be in fact want to redevelop themselves for the same reason women make the reassessment and capitalize on what value their SMV has left for them. Regardless of how she came into it, nothing is more daunting for a woman than to re-enter a sexual marketplace at such a severe disadvantage. After the war, women dread the idea of having to start over in sexual marketplace in which they are grossly outmatched, so even the slightest deviation from the security forever script becomes a major ego threat. If that security is more or less assured, there are feminine social conventions ready to take that prospect more palatable. 40 is the new 30. You still got it. And of course, the strong independent woman brand offers women a plan for cougardom. Depending on woman's relative SMV, that is to say amongst her generation peers, she may entertain this convention more or less successfully. But this reinvention of a woman party years still suffers from the need to re-establish a semblance of security after a point. While it may be exciting to relearn how to maneuver in a new SMP, the underlying desire is still one on security. Later phase security. Finally, we come full circle back to the new interpretation of the same security a woman sought after her epiphany phase. During this phase, that may last from a woman's late 40s to 50s or even indefinitely, as a result of inevitable SMV decay, the security side of a woman's hypergamy swings into final permanent position. It is important to remind yourself of the distinction that this security isn't necessarily founded on social provisioning, but rather an emotional, intimate dependency and acceptance of a woman from an acceptability masculine man, often in spite of a past that she would rather be expects to be forgiven by virtue of her age and her perceived life experience. While she may harbor some desire to live vicariously through the experiences her now grown daughters or younger feminine friends in various phases themselves, her message to them is one of precaution, but tempered with the subconscious awareness of her hypergamy has set in the frame of her past. This is the phase during which, duplicitously, women tend to mentally rewrite their past of what they believe should have been benefit for younger women. As an aside, I should point out that while the advent of the internet and the permanency of all things digital, this is becoming increasingly more difficult to midlife women. This is the phase during which a woman not only desires secure acceptance of who she is from a suitable man, but it is also the sense she attempts to create a secure social paradigm for herself. To be sure, this drive is firmly couched in a woman's innate solipsism, but her desire for security extends beyond a want to her own personal, assured security and to womankind as a whole. To be sure, this drive is firmly couched in a woman's innate solipsism, but her desire for security extends beyond a want for her own personal, assured security and to a womankind as a whole. Women in this phase may be concerned for the future of their daughters and sons who may come into contact with women following the same hypergamistic paradigm she used to be on their fathers, but the concern is voiced on the society and the women as a whole. Rarely in this social concern and admission or testament of her own regret, but rather it is something she must address to reconcile the parts of her past, the undeniable results of her hypergamy that she can't escape. Once menopause occurs, that retrospective needs become more urgent. Social convention Bridgefort's law. Robert S. Bridgeforth, 1876 to 1948, was trained as a surgeon, but found fame as a social anthropologist and in later life as a novelist. You can look up him on the Wikipedia to get a better understanding of his social ideas. Some I agree with, others I think are dated. However, Bridgefort's law was found an unlikely popularity in the 21st century monosphere and finds a new relevance when contrasted with the late security phase. The female, not the male, determines all the conditions of the animal family. Where the female can derive no benefit from association with the male, no such association takes place. As you can guess, this position makes for the interesting parallel when you consider that a woman has reached an age well past her prime sexual years and has, for the better part, her long-term security needs provided for the family, past or present, husband, social support infrastructure and feminine unique social benefits. As you can guess, this proposition makes for an interesting parallel when you consider that a woman has reached an age well past her prime sexual years and has, for the better part, her long-term security needs provided for by family, past or present husband, social support infrastructure and feminine unique social benefits. There are other conditions and interpretations various red pill bloggers have applied to this law, but for the purpose of understanding the later maturity phase, here I think it's best to stay with the Bridgeforth initial concept. In 2013, the New Research Center released an analysis on marriage trend based on the data from the US Census Bureau. That analysis indicated that while nearly 2/3 of the previously married men expressed a desire to remarry, less than half of the previously married women had the same desire. You can digest that data in the context of our contemporary sexual marketplace and come to the conclusion that women simply aren't prepared for or willing to make the effort to secure new monogamy, but I would propose that much of that lack of will is also the result of Bridgeforth's law. Men, particularly men of their own demographic and comparative socio-economic status, simply don't serve the same usefulness to women whose long-term security, both financial and interpersonal, is relatively provided for. On some level of consciousness, women perceive less or no benefit from those men in the same degree at which they had used for them when facing their epiphany phase earlier in life. He was never much of a man. Since I started writing on suicide, and especially more now that I have detailed a societal conflict in an open hypergamy, I've heard many guys relate a similar story about how their grandmother, mother or mother-in-law had just openly told him or his wife that her husband was never much of a man. Those women were all in their late 70s to early 80s, and at the face of life all bets are off. What do they really have to lose by letting their daughters and granddaughters on a grandma words of warning about settling on a man? I've even heard women readers relate how their other mothers confessed that there was just a part of her she could never share with a man like her father. This confession usually came after her husband was in the ground or has been delivered to be assisted living facility or was far too gone to really register the gravity of her real end of it all estimate of him after living the better part of her life with him. The guys who relate these stories to me are red pill aware to their jaws dropping came into little known expectation, but imagine how the blue pill husband or the daughter of one of these elderly women must process the confession. What mental contortions does a man need to do to fit that information into a blue pill mindset? When a woman has nothing really to lose by coping to it when they are most comfortable with openly expressing hypergamy, this is becoming more common to young women due to their social and personal security they have entitled to now. But for women who don't really feel that security has solidified until their golden years, this abomination and convention of the open hypergamy almost seems like a relief to them. A relief in the hope that they have want their daughter or granddaughter to opt for monogamy with the existing alpha lover husband, no matter how perceptual, rather than the safe bet she made settling on the plan B man, her better dependable husband she conveniently found in the epiphany phase. As women age towards their later years, an urgency to warn young generation of their sisterhood about the results in the hypergamous life decisions becomes more pressing. To be sure, there is a degree of desire to live vicariously through their daughters and granddaughters' experiences, but so, this conversion is for their own need for closure. I find no coming clean about what was really influencing those past decisions and living or not with them. There comes a point in a woman's life when admitting the ugly truth feels better than walling over keeping up the pretense of genuine concern. Far too many blue pill men, even young men, are terrified of living a life of lonely old man. They imagine that if they don't comply with the feminine imperative present rational frame of women, that they will live lives of quiet depression. In the first book, I outlined this in the myth of the lonely old man. The third point is one where men are encouraged to believe that if they don't comply with women's rational primacy, they will endure a life of decaying loneliness into old age, unloved and devoid of children would comfort them beside as they passively pass into the next life. What these blue pill men fail to realize is this is simply one more part of the fantasy they conditioned for. Do a Google image search for end-of-life issues. See all those pictures of grandpa holding hands with their wife and family in a clean, comforting hospice bed saying his past goodbyes before he passes on. That advertising is the blue pill fantasy. In all likelihood, you'll die in an elderly care home from lung fluid buildup in the middle of the night with no one around or complete stranger in the bed next to you. I understand that depressing thought, but the truth is that you already have a little pull in deciding how you are going out of that stage, and hopefully that wakes you up about living a blue pill existence besides of fear, compliance and appeasement to the end. Put that into perspective with a man who wakes up his red pill condition. End of chapter 5.